Have you ever met someone, heard their name, and then realized just a few seconds later that you already forgot it? This situation happens to many people. It can feel awkward, especially when you meet someone new and suddenly your mind goes blank when you try to remember their name. Some people seem to remember names easily, even after hearing them only once. Others forget them almost immediately. At first, it may seem like this happens because someone has a bad memory. But psychology shows that forgetting names is rarely about memory itself. In most cases, it has more to do with attention, how the brain processes information, and what the mind focuses on during social interactions. Today we will explore the psychology of people who easily forget names and why this happens. One of the main reasons is a lack of attention during the moment of introduction. When people meet for the first time, many things happen at once. You shake hands, smile, think about what to say next, and try to make a good impression. During all of this, the person says their name only once. If your attention is divided at that moment, your brain may simply fail to store the name properly. You may hear it, but your brain does not fully process it. Another common reason is that many people focus more on themselves than on the other person during introductions. When meeting someone new, people often think about the impression they are making. They might wonder if they look confident enough, if they are saying the right things, or if they seem interesting. When the brain is focused on internal thoughts, it pays less attention to external information. As a result, the name that was just said quickly disappears from memory. A third reason has to do with how human memory works. The brain remembers information more easily when it has meaning or context. For example, it is easier to remember a person's profession, a story they told, or something unusual about them. But a name by itself often has no meaning when you first hear it. It is simply a sound. Without a connection to something familiar, the brain has difficulty storing it. Information overload also plays a big role. In modern life, people are constantly exposed to a huge amount of information. Social media, messages, conversations, news, and new contacts all compete for attention. Because of this, the brain must filter information and decide what is important enough to keep. If you meet several new people in a short time, your brain may struggle to keep track of all the names. Some of them simply get lost. Another reason people forget names is the lack of repetition. Memory becomes stronger when information is repeated. When someone says their name only once, there is very little opportunity for the brain to reinforce that memory. This is why people who repeat a name during a conversation usually remember it better. For example, saying "Nice to meet you, Alex," or "So Alex, what do you do?" helps the brain store the name more effectively. Stress and social anxiety can also affect memory during introductions. For some people, meeting new people can create nervousness. In stressful situations, the brain focuses on managing emotions rather than storing new information. When someone feels anxious, their attention becomes narrower. Their mind may focus on their own behavior, body language, or words, leaving less mental space to remember a name. Another interesting factor is that humans are naturally better at remembering faces than names. The human brain has special systems designed to recognize faces. From an evolutionary perspective, recognizing people was extremely important for survival. As a result, the brain processes visual information about faces very efficiently. This is why you might easily recognize someone you met years ago but struggle to remember their name. Names, on the other hand, are abstract sounds. They do not always connect to something visual or meaningful. Without a clear connection, the brain often fails to store them as strongly as it stores visual information. Another psychological reason is that some people have very active minds. Their thoughts move quickly from one idea to another. During a conversation, they may already be thinking about what to say next, what questions to ask, or how the interaction is going. Because their mind is constantly moving forward, they may not stay focused long enough on the name that was just introduced. Associations also play a major role in memory. People remember information better when they can connect it to something familiar. For example, if someone introduces themselves with a name that reminds you of a friend, a celebrity, or a character from a movie, you are more likely to remember it. Without these associations, the name may remain just a random sound that the brain quickly forgets. There is also another interesting psychological factor. The brain constantly tries to save energy. Memory requires mental resources, and the brain does not store every piece of information equally. It subconsciously decides what seems important and what does not. If your brain does not see an immediate reason to remember someone's name, it may simply not store it carefully. This is especially true in situations where the brain assumes that the interaction may not be long-term. If the mind believes that you may never see the person again, it may treat the name as low-priority information. However, forgetting names does not mean someone is careless or disrespectful. In fact, many people who struggle to remember names have excellent memory in other areas. They might remember faces very well, recall conversations in detail, or remember events and situations clearly. This happens because the brain uses different systems to process different types of information. Visual memory, emotional memory, and verbal memory all function in slightly different ways. The good news is that remembering names is a skill that can be improved. Small changes in behavior can significantly increase the chances of remembering someone's name. One helpful technique is to repeat the name immediately after hearing it. Another useful method is to create a mental association between the name and something about the person. For example, you might connect the name with their job, appearance, or something they mentioned during the conversation. Using the name naturally during the conversation also helps reinforce the memory. The more times the brain processes the information, the stronger the memory becomes. Over time, these small habits train the brain to treat names as important information. As a result, remembering names becomes easier and more natural. In the end, the psychology of people who easily forget names is not really about poor memory. It is more about attention, mental focus, and how the brain prioritizes information during social interactions. When attention is divided, when the mind is busy with other thoughts, or when information lacks meaning, the brain simply fails to store the name properly. But when someone begins to pay more attention during introductions and uses simple memory techniques, the brain quickly adapts. With practice, remembering names can become a natural and effortless skill.